As many of you are likely aware, the Polaris was set to receive a significant number of nerfs in the upcoming patch. All of the nerfs, with the exception of the maneuverability nerf, which I support, by the way, have been reverted. And, in an ironic twist of fate, it would seem as if the Polaris has been buffed. I am putting the latest change here on screen for you to check out. In my view, these changes are both fair and balanced. However, several glaring issues remain with Star Citizen's Multicrew design. It feels as though Multicrew ships have been largely neglected for the better part of a decade, and I believe this reflects either a lack of realistic plan from CIG for how Multicrew gameplay should function, or that the plan they do have is fundamentally incompatible with an MMO environment featuring PvP. In this video, we will not only review the changes to the Polaris, but also examine the core issues that have long affected Multicrew gameplay, and discuss some potential solutions. How many of you have visited Spectrum, or God forbid, Reddit, and read the numerous threads where people discuss how they believe Multicrew gameplay in Star Citizen should work? The feedback, ideas, and expectations are rarely based on the reality of the game, and are often drawn from impractical visions that exist only in the minds of their authors. As a result, the feedback and expectations could best be described as attempts by children to relive their favorite science fiction movie tropes within a video game, rather than offering practical representations of how the game currently plays, or how a proper and functioning system should operate. Unfortunately, it appears that this unrealistic vision is not limited to the more delusional users of these forums, but at times even extends to the developers themselves. In Star Citizen, discussions about Multicrew gameplay almost always seem to revolve around how to limit its power rather than how to enhance or encourage it. From foolish cinematic ideas like real-time fire spreading that players must put out, to ridiculous fuse systems just to bring ship systems online. None of these concepts sound enjoyable or conducive to good gameplay. I do not see how requiring a crew to engage in a variety of cinematic minigames in a multiplayer environment will result in a fun, balanced, and engaging experience for players. What is often suggested sounds more like a series of chores and arbitrary conditions that must be satisfied just to begin experiencing Multicrew gameplay. Now, compare that to the simple act of flying a single-seat fighter, a class of ship, mind you, that has dominated and continues to dominate the game. There was a brief window where this was not the case, and that window was the Polaris. However, it now seems that window might be about to close, and once again, the single-seat fighter will reign supreme, while those of us who enjoy Multicrew gameplay are left to serve merely as content for others. Have you ever paid attention to how CIG has described the approach to Multicrew ships? Entire systems have been designed and tested to treat Multicrew ships like PvE raid bosses operating in phases. Let us consider the sub-targeting system, for example. You can aim at, lock onto, and fire your weapons at key points on a ship to disable them. I am not personally opposed to such systems being included in the game, and I believe they offer an interesting mechanic for those attacking larger ships. However, I would also expect players on the receiving end to have the ability to bring those systems back online through internal repairs or some other intuitive form of damage control, one that is not overly complicated when compared to the relatively simple act of destroying them. The initial concept of targeting subsystems seems appropriate for a single-player game or a cooperative PvE experience because PvE encounters are designed with the expectation that they will be defeated. However, attempting to apply this designed to be beaten philosophy to PvP simply does not work. There is no clearer example of this failure than the current state and presumably future state of Multicrew ships. Each of these ships has been designed with glaring weak points, inadequate turret coverage, and numerous access points for hostile boarding actions. If you think about it carefully, Every Multicrew ship in the game has effectively been designed as a multi-stage raid boss fight that also doubles as a mobile FPS map. As long as Multicrew ships are deliberately given obvious, exploitable weaknesses and are built around the idea of being beaten, the vision of a viable, functioning Multicrew experience in a PvP environment will remain nothing more than an idea and a dream. You may have heard me use the 1 + 1 = 3 equation before in my videos. It is a design philosophy that promotes the use of crewed vehicles over uncrewed vehicles in games. The idea is that the more crew a vehicle requires, the more effective it becomes when properly manned, and the more capable it is of fighting equal or superior numbers of single-seat vehicles. Essentially, the vehicle that is crewed becomes a force multiplier. This is important for a variety of reasons within the game. First, this design ensures that those who take the time and effort to properly crew a vehicle will have a significant advantage over individuals who do not. Second, it gives legitimacy to that class of vehicle and helps differentiate and encourage their use, as opposed to simply bringing a collection of individually piloted ships. Third, it allows smaller, more organized groups of players to take on larger, perhaps less organized or less skilled groups. In Star Citizen, however, the opposite is true. The more people you bring in a multi-crew ship, the easier a target you become for individual players looking to score multi-kills and brag about it. I would also argue that, due to Star Citizen's lack of organizational tools and a game UI designed more for cinematic flair than as a functioning MMO interface, attempting to use multi-crew ships in any serious capacity places you at a strict disadvantage compared to groups who simply instruct individuals to pull fighters and converge on a location. I find it especially amusing that when the topic of bringing a multi-crew ship to a fight arises, players inevitably repeat their favorite phrase, "bring escorts," while citing nonsensical and irrelevant examples such as historical battles in World War II, or whatever other ill-conceived notions they have about how the game should play based on what Chris Roberts may or may not have said over a decade ago while trying to fleece gullible backers during the Kickstarter phase of this project. However, let us entertain the escort argument for a moment. Let us set up a fictional scenario in a vacuum, using current Star Citizen game systems and balance. I dislike using vacuum examples, but bear with me. Imagine you have a Polaris, fully crewed with approximately 9 players, escorted by 4 fighters. This force totals 13 players. They are facing a force of 13 fighters, no other ships involved. How do you think this battle will actually play out? The 4 escorts will be overwhelmed and annihilated by the 13 fighters because they are outnumbered. And no matter how skilled they are, 13 against 4 will end the same way every time. This leaves the Polaris and its 9 players completely at the mercy of opponents they cannot realistically threaten. The Polaris weapons cannot effectively reach small enemy ships. And, due to the nature of dogfighting, engagements become rapidly dispersed. Thus, it cannot contribute to the fight in any way, so the escorts are actually on their own. Now, how many escorts must we bring just to protect a ship that, in theory, should not even require external protection? 14, 20? At what point does the need for escorts render the multi-crew ship a liability? Now, allow me to present a better scenario using the 1 + 1 = 3 philosophy. You have the same Polaris, fully crewed with 9 players, and in its hangar, you have a Scorpius with a 2-player crew, for a total of 11 players. Let us assume that the Polaris's turrets can engage and effectively hit targets beyond 500 meters, and that the Scorpius is balanced to be a fair match against 3 light fighters in terms of firepower and durability. Ideally, these 2 ships, when properly operated together, should be more than a match for 13 individually piloted fighters, assuming the Polaris and its crew can contribute meaningfully to the battle. Let us take it even further. Imagine a Scorpius can return to the Polaris to be repaired and rearmed in a manner similar to how ships are serviced at a station. Let us also imagine that if the Scorpius is destroyed, a new one can be claimed from the Polaris' hangar, similar to an ASOP terminal. You would have a strong incentive to keep your fleet mobile, and you would have a valid, gameplay-supported reason to field capital ships and their crews, along with built-in escorts. Sadly, that is not the reality. As long as multi-crew ships with underperforming turrets are forced to rely on single-seat fighters that overperform, multi-crew gameplay will never, under any circumstances, be viable in Star Citizen. From the Polaris all the way down to the Scorpius, anything involving more than one player in a ship remains, and will continue to remain, a waste of time. In Star Citizen, weapons mounted on a manned turret are nothing more than immobile fighters. They share the same firepower as a fighter, but with none of the mobility or control. If turrets were redesigned to be more effective than individual ships, there might actually be a reason to use them. However, as it stands now, they are useless. Allow me to show you some footage of turrets in action that should perfectly illustrate why they are worthless, and have remained worthless for many years. So in this clip, I'm not going to start firing until my crosshair is green. It's green now. That makes you think you would actually hit your target. But notice how I'm coming nowhere close to hitting this guy in the Hornet. And the only thing he's doing is closing in on me and doing a slow roll. The velocity of these weapons is so low that they just do not hit the target. The range also not that great. We're now under 900 meters. We're getting a couple hits, not too many, and he's purposely closing forward. And he's going to continue doing this until I destroy him. I do not start getting reliable hits on this target until 500 meters and closer. This is completely unacceptable. It has been like this for years. This is why turrets suck. Now we're aiming at a Corsair. The game is telling me that I can hit this guy at out to 2,000 kilometers. It's not going to happen. It's the same problem as when we were inside of the laser repeaters shooting at the Hornet. But here's the difference. I told him to get ballistics and shoot at me, all while trying to slowly get close to me. He's landing his shots from the sub-targeting, the shots are ignoring the shields, and he's closing range on my ship. And he is going to actively face tank me and then destroy my turret. This is the most insane thing I have ever seen in a game that claims to have some form of multi-crew or whatever. Either way, my turret's dead now. I can't hit him. But no amount of complaining about turret ineptitude would be complete without including the friggin' Hammerhead, the biggest turd in the entire verse. Same thing here, except despite having full power to the weapons on this ship, I'm only getting 26 shots out of this thing. So not only am I unable to track him and hit him because turrets suck, but they also have the same shared capacitor. So the more weapons that are on the ship, the less power you get. I get it, it might be work in progress, but this is a fundamental issue. This is a major problem that has been going on for, again, years. Same story here, folks. I can't hit the guy 1,000 meters and below, not touching. By now, you probably get the point. After having seen that footage, please consider the following. Turrets no longer have an individual capacitor and instead share a capacitor with the rest of the ship, exactly like a single-seat fighter. Turrets are capped at a maximum of 75 shots per weapon, exactly like a single-seat fighter. Turrets are completely immobile and unable to avoid incoming fire or maneuver to secure shots, unlike a single-seat fighter. In essence, turrets are simply fighter weapons mounted on a bigger, slower, and significantly less effective platform. The solution to this problem is incredibly simple. First, either drastically reduce the power draw of weapons mounted on turrets, or drastically increase the number of shots turrets can fire independently of the ship's shared power system. Ideally, both. It makes no sense that a turret on a hammerhead, even when the hammerhead has full power directed to weapons, can only fire 25 shots before needing to recharge, let alone being capped at 75 shots total. I would grant turrets hundreds upon hundreds of shots, essentially a near endless hail of fire. If you wish to approach a ship equipped with turrets, you should be prepared to pay the price. The second change that needs to be made is the addition of a range and velocity modifier to all ships that mount turrets. Even when using the highest velocity laser weapons available in the game, turrets cannot reliably hit a rolling light fighter until it closes to around 500 meters. There is no practical reason a fighter should ever need to approach that close to engage a capital ship. When a player is operating a turret and the aiming reticle turns green, that turret should hit. Simple as that. No more of this nonsense where a moderately competent pilot executing a basic rolling maneuver can become effectively invincible to any number of turrets. It makes absolutely no sense to me that CIG has not added this type of modifier to the game. Numerous ships already possess modifiers. Some ships have emission modifiers that either increase or decrease their detection signatures. Others have modifiers related to ballistic resistance, while some have reduced or non-existent resistances. Even NPC-controlled ground turrets around facilities and stations have been buffed to have higher projectile velocity than their ship-mounted counterparts. Despite all of this, there has never been any move to implement this one simple change that would go such a long way toward making turret-equipped ships viable for something other than simply killing NPCs. Oh, and before we move on, if you think it is bad that ship-mounted turrets struggle to hit targets without a special modifier, imagine how much worse it is going to be for ground-based anti-air platforms like the Centurion. Size 3 shields and above fall quickly to weapons fire in this game. This is nothing new. All ships with size 3 shields have been flying turds for as long as they have been available, only enjoying a brief period of success during the early days of Master Mode's testing, when the Constellation was a light fighter killing machine. Those days are long gone, and now those big ships are nothing more than punching bags for the light fighter mafia. The Polaris, even after the nerfs, has remained relatively tough, and it is still difficult to bring its shields down. I did some testing. Let me show you the results. Now, this is the buffed Polaris, the one that we are likely to be getting when this patch actually hits to PU. Same deal, we're taking shots on the rear here, hitting it, and you can now notice immediately how slow these shields are dropping. I like this. This is what I'm expecting from a capital ship. A Corsair, which is now specifically designed with this loadout to rip away the shields of a Polaris, is actually struggling to do it. And there is no interference whatsoever from any other ships or turrets, which do suck by the way, at all. And it's still struggling. So these tests show that the Polaris is pretty much just fine, probably a little bit better than it was before in terms of survivability. But that doesn't address the main issue for other ships that are not the Polaris. Remember, we have an entire class of ship below the Polaris that still sucks, and they're also multi-crew. There has to be some viability for those ships. And I can think of two relatively simple changes that would go a long way in adding that. The first solution is pretty simple. Back in the day, size 3 shields and above used to have a constantly regenerating mechanic, meaning that when you were taking damage, you would still be passively regenerating your shield. This was later removed, I'm not sure why. Bringing this feature back would probably go a long way in solving some of the problems, because if you're able to rotate your shield faces and through some pretty good helmsmanship and skill, spread that damage out, you're able to extend the life of your shields. And as we know, the shields mean everything in this game because the hull damage it's not there. You get ripped apart in anything other than a Polaris. But that also brings us to the second problem. which is how much firepower certain ships in this game have, especially small ships. CIG has this fetish for quote-unquote punching above its weight when it comes to certain ships, and because of this, these smaller fighters shred big ships. There's no love given to survivability, there's only love given to firepower and damage output. And because of that, the only two stats that end up mattering in this game are your firepower and your maneuverability. Well, big ships in a lot of cases don't have either firepower or maneuverability, which just makes them big punching bags. So a controversial fix to this problem, it's pretty simple, but it's just to slightly reduce the amount of damage that all weapons in the game do, thus increasing the TTK on all the ships. And I know some people are going to scoff and go, well, I don't want it to take 5 minutes to kill something, but nobody's advocating for 5 minutes on a light fighter, but something a little bit longer than what we have now. Because people die in like, what, under 10-15 seconds? The damage is astronomical, especially if you're loading up NBDs on some of these smaller ships. But even if damage was to remain as it is, I think adding the constantly regenerating shield mechanic would be a step in the right direction. So in conclusion, to sum all of this up, initially when they pushed out the Polaris nerf, I was a bit concerned. I was like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, and maybe they don't understand what they're doing. I recorded a significant portion of this video with the knowledge of the old nerf. Once the video was done, they released the changes and the buffs to the Polaris, reverting a lot of the nerfs and just overall making the ship better. So I had to redo a lot of this video. But the core problems really have not ever changed, and that's that multi-crew ships, regardless of their size, they don't act like a force multiplier. Funnily enough, the way the game is currently designed, multi-crew is so bad that you're better off ripping the turrets off of ships that have turrets. That way you get more capacitor and have more damage output for whatever ship you're in as the pilot. That is the most backwards design I've ever heard of, but it works, and that's what people do. That's why the Corsair does so much damage. You rip off those turrets, you have a ton of firepower in those big guns. But this video is long enough, you guys kind of get the point. I've been talking about this for a while. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me some comments below. Our Discord's on the screen. Hop onto the Discord. Let's discuss some stuff. Or you can come on there and tell me I'm dumb if you want. That's cool too. I'm always down for a fight. But either way, have a good one, guys. Thank you.